The knocking resounded at 11:40 at night. It wasn't a polite knock, nor a timid one. It was the kind of knock that said, "We don't have time for you to think about this." Caroline wiped down the last table in her tiny restaurant, Mama T's kitchen, the only thing she had left in this world besides her 6-year-old daughter, Morgan, who was asleep on a pile of flour sacks in the back room. The knocking came again, harder. "We are closed," Caroline called out, wringing the rag between her hands. "Come back tomorrow," a voice answered through the door. Deep, calm, but underneath it, urgency. "Please, we need shelter." Caroline stopped wringing the rag. She looked at the door, then at the back room where Morgan slept, then at the door again. Every part of her brain said, "Don't open it." But something in that voice. She unbolted the lock and pulled the door open, just a crack. And then her stomach dropped. There wasn't one man standing outside her restaurant. There were 21. 20 of them stood in a loose formation behind a single man at the front. They were all wearing dark suits, torn, dusty, some stained with what looked like dirt and engine oil. A few had cuts on their faces. One had his arm in a makeshift sling made from a ripped jacket. And the man at the front, he was tall, sharp jawline, black hair pushed back from his face, though a few strands had fallen loose. His suit was the most damaged of all, ripped at the shoulder, collar half torn off, a streak of dried mud across his chest. But he stood like none of that mattered, like he could be standing in a palace or standing in a ditch, and his posture wouldn't change 1 inch. His eyes met hers, dark, steady, and exhausted in a way that went deeper than just one bad night. "We need shelter," he said again, "just for tonight. We will not cause trouble." Caroline stared at him, then at the 20 men behind him, then back at him. Are you in some kind of trouble?" He didn't answer right away. One of the men behind him, shorter, stocky, with a scar across his left eyebrow, stepped forward and whispered something in Korean. The tall man raised a hand without looking back. The shorter man went silent instantly. "My name is Jung-ho," the tall man said. "I will explain everything. But right now, my men are injured. Tired. We have nowhere to go." He paused. "Why, I'm asking you, not telling you." Caroline's grip tightened on the doorframe. She was a single mother. Bankrupt. 3 months behind on rent for this very restaurant. Her landlord had already taped an eviction notice on the back door that she'd torn down before Morgan could see it. She had $42 in her bank account, a fridge full of leftover stew, and absolutely no business letting 21 strange men into her life. But Caroline had also been the woman standing outside a door once, begging for a chance, and nobody had opened it. She stepped aside. "Come in. Quickly, before someone sees." They filed in like shadows, silent, organized, precise. Each man stepping through the doorway and immediately scanning the room the way people do when they're used to checking for danger. Caroline watched them with wide eyes. A few of them bowed slightly to her as they passed, murmuring "Kamsahamnida," which she didn't understand, but the respect in their tone was clear enough. Sung-ho was the last to enter. He paused at the threshold and looked at her. Really looked at her, as if memorizing her face. "Thank you," he said quietly. Caroline locked the door behind him. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if I'm going to regret this." The men spread out across the small restaurant. Some sat on the floor against the walls. Others took the chairs. One, the stocky man with the scarred eyebrow, was already pulling a first aid kit from inside his jacket and tending to the man with the injured arm. "That's Byung-soo," Sung-ho said, noticing her staring. "He was a field medic before he joined me." "Joined you for what?" Caroline asked. "Who are you people?" Sung-ho pulled out a chair at the nearest table and sat. Not collapsed. Sat. Controlled. Even in exhaustion, every movement had a kind of discipline to it. "I run an organization," he said carefully. "In my country." "What kind of organization?" "The kind that makes enemies." Caroline's blood went cold. Are you criminals?" Seung-ho looked at her. Steady, no flinching. "Some people would call us that." Caroline took a step back. "I have a daughter sleeping in the back room. If you've brought danger to I would never put a child in harm's way." His voice was low but absolute, like a wall. "We were betrayed by someone inside our own ranks. Our safe house was compromised. Our vehicles were sabotaged. We've been moving on foot for 6 hours. So your restaurant was the only place with a light still on." Caroline stared at him. "You came to my restaurant because I forgot to turn off the light?" "Sometimes," Seung-ho said. "The smallest thing saves a life." She fed them. She didn't plan to. She planned to give them a corner of the floor, lock her back room door, hold Morgan close, and wait for sunrise. But then she saw how some of them were holding their stomachs, how one of the younger ones, barely older than 20, was sitting against the wall with his eyes half closed, too drained to even pretend he was fine. So Caroline went to the kitchen, reheated every last pot of leftover stew, rice, and roasted vegetables, and started carrying plates out. The men stared at her like she'd just performed a miracle. "Eat," she said. "It's not fancy, but it'll hold you until morning." The young one, the half-conscious boy against the wall, looked at the plate she set in front of him, and his eyes filled with tears. He said something in Korean, his voice cracking. Byung-soo, the stocky medic, translated. "He says it Morgans him of his mother's cooking." Caroline felt something tighten in her chest. She crouched down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" "Shai-sung," he whispered. "Well, Shi-sung, eat every bite. That's an order." He gave a weak, shaky smile and ate. Caroline stood and turned to find Seung-ho watching her from across the room. He hadn't touched his plate. "You too," she said. "Eat." "You've already done more than—" "I didn't ask for a speech. I said eat." Something shifted in Seung-ho's expression, and it was quick. Barely there, like a crack in a stone wall that sealed itself back up the instant you noticed it. He picked up his fork. And then, "Mama?" Caroline spun around. Morgan stood in the doorway of the back room, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her braids messy from sleep, her wide brown eyes taking in the room full of strangers. "Mama, who are all these people?" Every single man in the room went still. 21 men, hardened, exhausted, battle-worn, all frozen by a 6-year-old girl in pajamas printed with little cartoon clouds. Caroline rushed over and knelt in front of her daughter. "Baby, go back to sleep. They're just guests," Seung-ho said from behind her. Morgan peered around her mother's shoulder at the tall man sitting at the table. "You're really tall," Morgan said. "You're really brave," Seung-ho replied, "coming out here with all these strangers around. Mama always says brave and stupid are cousins." A choked laugh escaped from Byung-soo. He quickly turned it into a cough. Seung-ho's mouth curved, just slightly. "Your mama sounds very wise." Morgan looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Caroline. "Mama, the tall man looks sad. Can we keep him?" Caroline's face flushed hot. "He's not a puppy, Morgan. Go back to bed. Now." Morgan shuffled back to the room, casting one last look over her shoulder at Seung-ho, who raised a hand in a small wave. She waved back with her stuffed rabbit's paw. The door closed. Caroline exhaled and turned to face the room. "I apologize. She doesn't—" "Don't apologize," Seung-ho said. "She's wonderful." He looked at Caroline. "Nah, you're raising her alone?" Caroline's jaw set. "That's none of your business." "You're right. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy, not hostile, just Full. Byung-soo broke it. Boss, we should discuss the situation. Sung-ho nodded and stood. He looked at Caroline. We'll be quiet. You should rest. Rest? Caroline almost laughed. There are 21 strange men in my restaurant, and you want me to rest? I give you my word. No one in this room will let anything happen to you or your daughter. Not tonight. Not ever. The way he said not ever, like it wasn't a promise made in a desperate moment, but a fact he was stating about the future, made Caroline's skin prickle. She didn't trust him. She couldn't afford to trust anyone. But she was so tired. If anything happens to my daughter, she said quietly, I will make you regret the day you knocked on my door. Seung-ho didn't blink. I believe you. Caroline didn't sleep. Not really. She lay on the small cot in the back room next to Morgan, staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of Korean conversation filtering through the thin wall. She couldn't understand the words, but she could read the tones, tense, strategic, occasionally sharp, as if disagreements were flaring and being shut down. She thought about calling the police. She picked up her phone 3 times, put it down 3 times. Because what would she say? Hello, there are 21 Korean men in my restaurant and they asked nicely? Besides, the police in this town had never done anything for her. Not when her ex-husband, Doomy, cleaned out their savings and vanished. Not when the landlord changed the locks on their apartment without warning. Not when she reported the threats. No. Caroline had learned a long time ago that the only person who was going to save her was her. She finally drifted off sometime around 3 in the morning. When she woke up, the sun was cutting through the small window, and the restaurant was spotless. Every table wiped. Every chair pushed in. The floor scrubbed. The kitchen cleaner than she'd left it in months. The pots she'd used last night were washed, dried, and stacked, and sitting in the middle of the counter was a folded piece of paper. Caroline picked it up with shaking hands. Thank you for your kindness. We have left. You will not see us again. Sung-ho. Underneath the note were 6 crisp $100 bills. Caroline stared at the money. On $600. That was more than she'd made in the last 2 months combined. Her eyes burned. She pressed the note against her chest, and for the first time in a very long time, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the strange, disorienting shock of someone being kind to her when she had absolutely nothing to offer them in return. Morgan appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. Mama? Where did the tall man go? Caroline wiped her face quickly. He left, baby. Is he coming back? No. Oh. Morgan's face fell. He seemed nice. Caroline folded the note carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. Yeah, she whispered. He did? The eviction notice came back. This time, it wasn't taped to the back door. It was hand-delivered by Mr. Bello, and the landlord himself. A round man with a permanent sneer and suits that were all in one size too tight. He walked into Mama T's kitchen at noon on a Wednesday, slapped the paper on the counter, and smiled the way a cat smiles at a cornered mouse. You have 14 days, Caroline. Pay the full balance, $3,600, or you're out. Caroline gripped the edge of the counter. Mr. Bello, please, just give me 1 more month. Business is picking up. I just need... You said that last month, and the month before. He leaned forward. I have a buyer for this property, a real business, not a little soup kitchen that can't keep the lights on. This is all I have. Then I suggest you find more. He left. Caroline stood behind the counter, the eviction notice crumpling under her grip, and felt the ground tilting under her feet. 14 days. $3,600. She might as well have been asked to build a spaceship. Morgan was at school. The restaurant was empty. And for one terrible, spiraling moment, Caroline thought, maybe I should just give up. The bell above the door jingled. She looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that the kitchen was closed for the afternoon. It was Byung-soo, the stocky man with the scar on his eyebrow, Seung-ho's medic. He was wearing a clean jacket, his hands in his pockets, and he looked almost sheepish. "Hello," he said. "You remember me?" "I remember all of you." Caroline straightened. "What are you doing here? The note said I wouldn't see you again." "Yes, well." Byung-soo shifted his weight. "Boss doesn't always get what he wants." "What does that mean?" "It means..." Byung-soo glanced behind him, out the window, where a black car was parked on the curb. "It means he sent me to check on you." Caroline blinked. "Check on me?" "He wanted to know if you're okay, if you need anything." Byung-soo paused. "He made me promise to be subtle about it. I'm not very good at subtle." Caroline looked at the eviction notice on the counter, then at Byung-soo, then at the black car outside. "Is he in that car?" "No." "You're lying." Byung-soo winced. "I'm really not good at this." The back door of the black car opened, and Seung-ho stepped out. He looked different from that night. Clean suit, dark navy, not torn, hair neatly combed back, no mud, no dust, no desperation. He looked like what he actually was, a man with power, a man people listened to. But his eyes were the same, that steady, exhausted depth, like a well that went down further than you'd ever want to measure. He walked into the restaurant and stood across the counter from Caroline. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "Your note said I wouldn't see you again," Caroline said. "I know what the note said." "Then why are you here?" Seung-ho looked at the crumpled eviction notice on the counter. He didn't pick it up. He didn't need to. He could read it from where he stood. "How much do you owe?" he asked. "That's not why I opened my door for you. I didn't help you so you'd feel guilty and come throw money at me." "I know." "Then stop looking at that paper." $3,600, he said, clearly having already read it. Caroline snatched the notice off the counter and shoved it into her apron. "I don't need your help." "You fed 21 men. You gave us a roof. You didn't call the police. That doesn't mean you owe me. This isn't about debt." Seung-ho's voice was quiet, controlled. But something underneath it was straining. "This is about the fact that I haven't stopped thinking about." He cut himself off. Caroline's eyebrows rose. "About what?" Seung-ho looked at her, then away, then back. "About the stew," he said flatly. Byung-soo, standing by the door, put his face in his hands. "The stew," Caroline repeated. "It was excellent." "You came back, 3 weeks later, because of my stew." "I'm a man who appreciates good food." The silence stretched. Caroline stared at him. He stared back. Neither blinked. Then, against every instinct, so against every wall she'd built in the 2 years since Doomy left, Caroline laughed. It was short, more of a surprised bark than a real laugh, but it cracked something open in the room, and Seung-ho's rigid posture loosened. Just a fraction. "Fine," Caroline said. "Sit down. I'll heat up some stew. And then you're going to tell me exactly who you are, what you're doing in my country, and why you had 20 men with you that night. That's a lot of questions. And you've got a lot of stew to eat, so we're even," he told her. Not everything. She could tell he was holding pieces back, choosing his words the way a man disarms a bomb. But enough. His name was Kang Seung-ho. He was the head of a syndicate based in Mokpo, a port city on the southwestern coast of his country. Not the kind of syndicate that the movies show. No car chases. No glamorous nightclubs. His family's organization had started 3 generations ago as a shipping company. Over time, it grew. into trade, real estate, logistics. And somewhere along the way, lines got blurred. Business became territory. Partners became rivals. And running a company became running an empire that operated in the gray space between legal and illegal. My father built it into what it is now, Seung-ho said, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea Caroline had placed in front of him. When he died 2 years ago, I inherited everything, including his enemies. And one of those enemies, that's who betrayed you? Someone inside my own circle, someone I trusted. His grip on the cup tightened. They leaked our location to a rival group, the Daesung clan. We were ambushed during a meeting. Our safe house was burned. Our communications were cut. We had to leave the country on a cargo ship with nothing but what we were wearing. A cargo ship, Caroline said slowly. To here? It was the first ship leaving port. We didn't choose the destination. So you ended up in my town, by accident. Yes. And you knocked on my door. By accident. The light was on. Caroline leaned back in her chair. And the person who betrayed you. Do you know who it was? Seung-ho's expression changed. It didn't darken exactly. It just closed, like a door slamming shut behind his eyes. I have a suspicion, he said. Who? My younger brother. The name sat between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Your brother, Caroline said. Half-brother. Same father, different mothers. His name is Seung-jae. Seung-ho set down his cup. He's wanted to lead the organization since our father died. He believes the eldest son, me, was the wrong choice. And he may have decided to remove the obstacle by handing you to your enemies, by handing me to my enemies. Caroline was quiet for a long time. She thought about Doomy, her ex-husband, how she'd trusted him completely, how she'd built a life around him like a house built around a pillar, and how one day, with no warning, the pillar had just walked away, took everything, left her standing in the rubble. Betrayal by the people closest to you. She understood that language fluently. What are you going to do? She asked. I need to rebuild. Contact allies back home. Prove to my people that I'm still alive and still in control. But right now, he paused. Right now, I have 20 men. No resources. No safe communication channel and no base of operations. Caroline looked at him. He looked back. No, she said. I haven't asked anything. You were about to. I was going to ask if I could rent your back room for a fair price. You want to run your organization out of my restaurant's back room? Temporarily. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I'll pay above market rate. Your rent will be covered. Your eviction will go away. And if your enemies find you here? If those, the Daesung people, come looking? They won't. They think I'm dead. That's the only advantage I have right now, and I intend to use it. Caroline stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. A woman was pushing a stroller. 2 boys were kicking a ball against a wall. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life she'd been desperately trying to hold together with both hands. And here was this man, this stranger, offering to solve her biggest problem in exchange for dragging her into his. If anything happens to Morgan, she said without turning around, I will burn everything you have to the ground. Do you understand me? I understand you. Then we have a deal. She didn't turn around for another 10 seconds. She didn't want him to see that her hands were trembling, not from fear, from the terrifying, reckless hope that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. They moved in the next morning. Not all 20 men. There wasn't room for that. Seung-ho brought only 5 into the restaurant's back room. Byung-soo, a quiet technology expert named Jun-ho, who could apparently hack into anything with a screen, by a tall man named Woo Jin, who served as Seung-ho's personal guard, and 2 others, Gi-tae and Min Seok, who handled logistics and communication. The other 15 were distributed across the town in rented rooms, cheap motels, and one very confused Airbnb host who suddenly had 8 polite Korean men asking if the kitchen had a rice cooker. Seung-ho paid Caroline's back rent in full. The eviction notice disappeared. Mr. Bello showed up at the restaurant, stared at the cashier's check Caroline handed him, opened his mouth, closed it, and left without a word. For the first time in 6 months, Caroline could breathe, but that didn't mean she was comfortable. Having 5 men operating out of her back room was strange. They were quiet, disciplined, and absurdly clean. They took their shoes off at the door. They washed their own dishes. To Byung-soo even fixed the leaking pipe under her kitchen sink that she'd been ignoring for 4 months. But they were also clearly running something. Jun-ho had 3 laptops open at all times, screens filled with code and maps. Woo-jin stood by the back door for hours, watching the alley through a crack in the curtain, and Seung-ho spent long stretches on a burner phone, speaking rapid Korean in a tone that swung between authority and fury. Caroline tried to ignore it. She ran a restaurant during the day. The lunch crowd was small but loyal, and in the evenings, she cooked for Morgan, helped with homework, and pretended the back room didn't exist. It worked for about 4 days. Then Morgan ruined everything. "I made a friend," Morgan announced on Thursday afternoon, bursting through the front door with her backpack bouncing, and Caroline looked up from the register. "That's wonderful, baby. Who?" "His name is Shi-sung. He was sitting outside the bookstore, and he looked sad. So I gave him my juice box, and now we're best friends." Caroline's blood turned to ice. Shi-sung, the young one from that first night, the one who'd cried over her stew. Morgan, where is he now? "He walked me home. He's outside." Caroline rushed to the door. Shi-sung was standing on the sidewalk, looking mortified. He bowed immediately when he saw her. "I'm so sorry," he said. She came up to me and started talking, and I didn't know how to. "She's 6. She does that." Caroline pulled him inside by the sleeve. "Does Seung-ho know you're wandering around town by yourself?" Shi-sung's face went pale. "Please don't tell boss." "Tell boss what?" The voice came from behind them. Seung-ho stood in the doorway of the back room, arms folded, one eyebrow raised. Shi-sung looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I just went for a walk." "You were told to stay within the perimeter." "I know, but..." "Shi-sung." The boy's shoulders dropped. "Yes, boss." Seung-ho looked at him for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to Morgan, who was watching the whole exchange with open fascination. "You gave him a juice box?" Seung-ho asked her. "Apple flavor," Morgan said proudly. "And now you're best friends?" "Yep." Seung-ho looked at Shi-sung, looked at Morgan. Something in his face, that stone wall, cracked again. Just slightly. "Shi-sung," he said, "if you're going to go for walks, you take Gi-tae with you. And you don't wander past the market square, understood?" "Yes." "But boss," Shi-sung practically floated with relief. Morgan grabbed his hand and dragged him to a table to show him her drawings from school. Caroline watched them, a complicated knot forming in her chest. "He's just a kid," she said quietly to Seung-ho. "He's 22. He's a kid. What's someone that young doing in your world?" Seung-ho was quiet. "His father owed my organization a debt. Shi-sung offered himself in exchange. He's been with us since he was 16. I know what it is." Seung-ho's voice was tight. "I didn't create the system, but I'm trying to change it." "Are you?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something besides control in his eyes. Something raw, something almost desperate. "I'm trying," he said. Days turned into a week turned into 2, And somewhere in that blur of stew pots and Korean conversations, and Morgan's laughter and Seung-ho's quiet presence, something began to shift. It started small. Seung-ho began eating dinner at the restaurant instead of the back room. He'd sit at the corner table with whatever Caroline had cooked, and Morgan would orbit him like a tiny planet, chattering about school, her drawings, her stuffed rabbit, whose name apparently was General Whiskers. He listened to every word. Not politely, actually listened. Asked follow-up questions. Complimented her art with specific observations. The wings on that butterfly are asymmetric. That makes it more realistic. "You're good with her," Caroline said one evening after Morgan had finally gone to bed, since Seung-ho was helping her wipe down the tables, something he'd started doing without being asked, and which she'd stopped protesting after the third night. "She makes it easy," he said. "She doesn't, actually. She's picky about who she trusts. It took her teacher 2 months to get her to stop hiding behind my legs at drop-off." Caroline paused. "She trusted you in about 45 seconds. Children are better judges of character than adults. Or worse." He looked at her, that steady gaze. "You still don't trust me. I trust that you've paid my rent. I trust that your men are respectful. I trust that Byung-soo makes excellent tea." She wrung out the rag. "But trust you? The man who admitted he runs a criminal organization? I'm not there yet." "Fair. I'm glad you think so." They cleaned in silence for a while. A comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "Can I ask you something?" Seung-ho said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Morgan's father—" "No." Caroline's voice was immediate, hard. "You can't ask that." "Understood." More silence. But this one was different. Heavier. Full of a story Caroline wasn't ready to tell, and Seung-ho wasn't going to push for. He finished wiping the last table, folded the rag neatly, set it on the counter, and turned toward the back room. "Seung-ho." He stopped. "His name was Doomy," Caroline said. She didn't know why she was saying it. The words just came out. "He was charming, funny, made me feel like the only person in any room. We got married young. Had Morgan. And then one day, I came home and the apartment was empty. Bank account, empty. He took everything and disappeared. No note, no call, no explanation. I found out later he'd been gambling, owed people money. Bad people. He ran, and I was left holding a baby and a mountain of his debt." She stopped. Her throat was tight. Seung-ho had turned back to face her. He didn't say anything. Didn't offer sympathy or solutions, or any of the useless things people usually said. He just stood there. Present. Steady. Like a wall she could lean against if she chose to. "That's why I opened the door that night," she whispered, "because I know what it feels like to have nowhere to go." The distance between them suddenly felt very small. "Thank you for telling me," Seung-ho said. His voice was low, almost hoarse. "Don't make me regret it. I won't." He went to the back room. The door closed softly. Caroline stood alone in the empty restaurant, her hand over her chest, and feeling something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Something terrifying. Something warm. On the 15th day, everything changed. Jun-ho, the quiet tech expert, burst out of the back room at 6 in the morning with a look on his face that made every head in the restaurant turn. "Boss," he said, "we have a problem." Seung-ho stood from the table where he'd been reviewing documents. "What kind?" Jun-ho held up his laptop. His hands were shaking. "I intercepted a message on the old network. It's encrypted and routed through 4 different servers. It took me all night to decode it." "And?" "It's from Seung-jae." The room went silent. "Your brother sent a message." Byung-soo stood from his chair, his scarred face grim. "To who?" "To the Daesung clan." Jun-ho turned the laptop around. On the screen was a decoded message. Short, brutal, and devastating. He's alive. I have the location. Send the advance team. Caroline, who had been pouring coffee behind the counter, felt the mug slip. She caught it, barely, and stared at the screen. He knows where you are, she breathed. Seong-ho's expression didn't change, but she saw it, the tiniest shift in his stance, a coiling, like a spring compressing. How? He said to Junho. How could he know? I don't know yet. But boss, if the Daesung clan sends a team here, we have maybe 62 hours, maybe less. Caroline set the mug down with a crack. You told me they thought you were dead. You promised me. I know what I promised. You promised my daughter would be safe. And she will be. Seong-ho turned to face her fully. I will get you and Morgan out of here before. I'm not leaving my restaurant. Now this is all I have. Your life is worth more than a building. Easy for you to say. You're the reason the building is in danger. The words hung in the air like a slap. Seong-ho didn't flinch, but something in his eyes, that steady, deep well, rippled. You're right, he said quietly. This is my fault, and I will fix it. He turned to his men. His voice changed, became iron. Command. Byung-soo, contact the perimeter teams. Full alert. Junho, trace that message back. I want to know how my brother found us. Woo-jin, get eyes on every road into this town. Gitai, Min-seok, start preparing an extraction route for the civilian and her daughter. The civilian has a name, Caroline snapped. Seong-ho paused, looked at her. Something in his face softened, briefly, dangerously. Prepare an extraction route for Caroline and Morgan, he corrected himself. Their safety is the top priority, above mine, above all of ours. Is that clear? Yes, boss, came the unified response. Men moved, laptops opened, phones appeared, and Caroline stood in the middle of her tiny restaurant, watching her quiet little world transform into a command center, and realized, with a sinking, awful clarity, she was in this now. Whether she wanted to be or not, there was no going back. Caroline didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't because of strangers in her restaurant. It was because she'd made the mistake of caring about one of them. She sat on the edge of her cot, watching Morgan sleep. Peaceful, undisturbed, for one arm thrown over General Whiskers, and made a list in her head of every reason she should pack a bag right now and disappear. 1. A criminal syndicate was hunting the man in her back room. 2. That man's own brother had betrayed him. 3. She had a 6-year-old daughter who thought the most dangerous thing in the world was the spider that lived behind the toilet. 4. And this was the one that scared her most. She didn't want to leave. Not because of the money. Not because of the rent. Because somewhere between the stew and the silence, and the way Seong-ho looked at her daughter like she was the most important person he'd ever met, Caroline had started to feel something she had no business feeling. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Morning came gray and heavy with clouds. Now Caroline opened the restaurant as usual. She refused to change her routine, refused to let invisible enemies dictate how she lived. And by 9 o'clock, the first customers trickled in. Old Mr. Diallo, who came every day for tea and bread. The Mensa twins, who split one plate of rice between them. A few workers from the construction site down the road. Normal, ordinary, safe. Then, at exactly 10:15, a woman walked in. She was stunning. That was the first thing Caroline noticed, and hated herself for noticing. Tall, slender, dressed in a cream-colored blouse and tailored trousers that looked like they cost more than Caroline's monthly grocery bill. Her hair was jet black and cut sharp at her shoulders. Her features were Korean, high cheekbones, dark almond eyes, and a mouth that curved into a smile that was somehow both warm and calculated at the same time. She sat at the counter and folded her hands. "Good morning," she said in perfect English. "I'll have whatever you recommend." Caroline studied her. "You're not from around here." "No, I'm visiting." The woman extended her hand. "My name is Yu Nari." "Caroline." She shook the hand. Firm grip, cool fingers. "Visiting from where?" "Mokpo." Nari's smile widened. "I believe we have a mutual friend." Caroline's hand went still on the counter. Before she could respond, the back room door opened, and Seung-ho stepped out. He saw Nari and stopped dead. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Nari." His voice was flat, colorless. "How did you find me?" "You're not as invisible as you think. A Duong-ho." Nari swiveled on her stool to face him, crossing her legs. "I've been looking for you since the ambush. When I heard a rumor about a group of Korean men buying out every bag of rice in a small African town, well, it wasn't hard to narrow down. That doesn't answer my question. I came to help. The last person who said that sold me to the Daesung clan." Nari's expression didn't waver. "I'm not your brother." "No. You're worse. You're the woman who was engaged to him." The silence that followed could have crushed diamonds. Caroline looked from Seung-ho to Nari and back again, engaged, to his brother, the brother who'd betrayed him. "Was," Nari said, emphasizing the word. "Past tense. The engagement ended the night Sung-jae tried to have you killed. No, I want nothing to do with a man who would murder his own blood for a seat at a table. And yet here you are, at my table. Because I have information you need." Nari reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. She set it on the counter between them. "This contains 3 months of communication logs between Seung-jae and the Daesung clan, meeting locations, payment records, names of every person inside your organization who's been feeding him information." Seung-ho looked at the flash drive, didn't touch it. "Why would you give me this? Because Sung-jae isn't just coming for you." Nari's composed mask slipped, just for a second, and underneath it, Caroline saw something raw. Fear. "He's coming for anyone who ever stood with you. That includes me. That includes the men who are loyal to you. And he's not trying to take the organization. He's trying to burn it down and rebuild it in his image. So, this is self-preservation, not loyalty. Does it matter? The information is real." Seung-ho stared at her. Then, slowly, he picked up the flash drive. "Junho will verify everything on this. If even one file is corrupted, one piece of data is false. It's all real, every byte." He turned and walked back toward the room. At the doorway, he paused without turning. "Byung-soo, find her a place to stay. Not here." "I'd rather stay here," Nari said. "I wasn't asking." He disappeared into the back. Nari let out a slow breath. Then she turned back to the counter and looked at Caroline with an expression that was part amusement, part resignation. "He hasn't changed at all," Nari said. Caroline said nothing. She picked up a rag and started wiping the counter that was already clean. "You don't like me," Nari observed. "I don't know you. But you've already decided something about me." Caroline stopped wiping. "You walked into my restaurant looking like a magazine cover. You're apparently connected to the man who's trying to kill someone who's staying here. And you brought a flash drive full of secrets, like it's a casual Wednesday. So forgive me if I need a minute to warm up." Nari tilted her head, studied Caroline with those sharp, dark eyes. "Someone you what?" she asked softly. "Excuse me?" You started to say, "Someone I," and then stopped. "Someone you what?" Caroline's face heated. "Someone who's a guest in my establishment. That's all." Nari's smile returned, knowing, infuriating. Of course, she said. What, that's all. Byung-soo found Nari a room at a guest house 3 blocks away. She left the restaurant with a graceful nod to Caroline and a look over her shoulder at the back room door that lasted 2 seconds too long. The moment she was gone, Caroline marched to the back room and knocked. Seong-ho opened the door. Behind him, Jun-ho was already plugging the flash drive into an isolated laptop. "Who is she?" Caroline demanded. "Really?" "She told you. You, Nari. My brother's ex-fiancée. And what was she to you?" The question came out sharper than Caroline intended. She heard it, the edge in her own voice, and wanted to snatch the words back out of the air. Seong-ho's expression was unreadable. "She was someone I knew a long time ago. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." They stared at each other. The air between them felt electric, charged with something neither of them was willing to name. "Boss," Jun-ho called from behind the laptop. "The files are clean, no malware, and the data, it's extensive. If this is real, we have everything we need to dismantle Seung-jae's network." Seong-ho broke eye contact with Caroline. "Start cross-referencing. I want names confirmed by morning." He looked back at Caroline. "I know you have questions." "I have 1,000 questions." "Pick one." Caroline crossed her arms. "Were you in love with her?" That wasn't the question she'd planned to ask. It just escaped. Seong-ho was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Once," he said, "a long time ago, before she chose my brother." The honesty of it hit Caroline like a wave, unexpected, disorienting. She'd braced herself for deflection, on for another careful non-answer. Instead, he'd just told her the truth. "Thank you," she said stiffly, "for being honest." "You deserve honesty." She turned and walked back to the kitchen before he could see the look on her face. 2 days later, Nari's information was good. Better than good. It was devastating. Jun-ho spent 48 hours mapping every connection, every payment, every coded message between Seung-jae and the Daesung clan. The picture that emerged was worse than anyone had expected. Seung-jae hadn't just betrayed his brother. He'd been planning it for over a year. Slowly, methodically, he'd turned 11 members of Seung-ho's inner circle, bribing some, threatening others, and promoting those loyal to him into positions where they could do the most damage. 11, Seung-ho said, staring at the list of names. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white around the edge of the table. "I trusted every single one of them." "That's how betrayal works," Caroline said from the doorway. She'd brought coffee, a habit she'd developed without realizing it. "It only hurts when it comes from someone you trusted." He looked at her. "Speaking from experience?" "Speaking from a woman whose husband emptied their savings and vanished." "Yeah, I know a thing or two about misplaced trust." Something passed between them in that look. Not attraction. Not exactly. Something deeper. Recognition. 2 people who'd been gutted by the ones they loved and had to stitch themselves back together alone. Byung-soo cleared his throat from the corner. "Boss, there's something else in the files." "What?" "The Daesung clan's advance team. Like Jun-ho found their travel records." Byung-soo's scarred face was grim. "They're not coming in 62 hours. When?" "They landed yesterday." Caroline picked up Morgan from school every day at 3 o'clock. Every day, without exception. Rain, heat, exhaustion. It didn't matter. 3 o'clock, she was at that gate. On this day, the day everything shattered, she was 4 minutes late. 4 minutes. Because Mr. Diallo had spilled his tea, and she'd stopped to help clean it up. And then the traffic light at the intersection was broken, and she'd had to wait for a gap in the cars. And when she finally reached the school gate at 3:04, Morgan wasn't there. The teacher, Mrs. Daly, was standing at the gate with a clipboard and a puzzled expression. Caroline. Morgan's father already picked her up. About 5 minutes ago. The world tilted. Her what? Her father. He showed identification. Morgan seemed to recognize him. She went with him, willingly. Caroline couldn't breathe. Her lungs had turned to cement. Morgan doesn't have. I'm the only one on the pickup list. You know that. You know that. Mrs. Daly's face changed from puzzled to alarmed. He had documentation, Caroline. A birth certificate. He said you'd arranged. Caroline was already running. She didn't know where. She just ran. Down the street, past the market, around the corner, her eyes scanning every face, every car, every shadow. Doomy. It had to be Doomy. After 2 years of silence, 2 years of nothing, he'd come back, and he'd taken Morgan. But why? Why now? What could he possibly? She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk as a thought hit her like a truck. What if it wasn't Doomy? What if it was someone else entirely? What if Morgan's disappearance had nothing to do with her ex-husband, and everything to do with the men in her back room? She burst through the restaurant door so hard it nearly came off its hinges. Seung-ho! He was in the back room. He came out immediately. One look at her face, and his entire demeanor shifted. The calm, controlled businessman vanished. What replaced him was something older, something harder. What happened? Morgan is gone. Someone took her from school. They said they were her father. The room erupted. Byung-soo was on his feet. Woo-jin reached for his jacket. Junho's fingers were already flying across a keyboard. Yao-wen. Seung-ho's voice was ice. 5 minutes ago, maybe 10 now. Junho. Access every camera within a 1-mile radius of the school. Byung-soo, call all teams. Full M-Dalilization. Woo-jin, get the car, now. Men scattered. Phones appeared. Voices barked orders in Korean. Seung-ho gripped Caroline's shoulders, firm, grounding. Look at me. She looked at him. Her vision was blurring. Her whole body was shaking. I will find her, he said. Do you hear me? I will find your daughter. If this is because of you, if someone took her because of you, then I will get her back, and I will make sure no one ever threatens her again. I swear this to you. The rawness in his voice, the absolute, unshakable conviction, broke something inside Caroline's chest. Not from sadness, from trust. Involuntary, terrifying, total trust. She grabbed the front of his shirt. Bring her home. I will. He was out the door in 3 seconds. The black car tore away from the curb, and Caroline was left standing in her empty restaurant, gripping the counter with both hands, praying to every force in the universe that her baby was safe. 46 minutes. That's how long Caroline stood behind the counter without sitting, without eating, without doing anything except staring at her phone and trying not to scream. 46 minutes of silence. Then a call. Unknown number. She answered before the first ring finished. Caroline. It was Seung-ho. We found the car, a gray sedan, rented under a false name. Junho tracked it through traffic cameras heading east toward the highway. Is Morgan? We're following now. I need you to stay where you are. I can't just sit here while my daughter, Caroline, his voice, that iron command voice, cut through her panic. If you leave the restaurant, I can't protect you and find Morgan at the same time. Stay where you are. Trust me. The line went dead. Trust me. He kept saying that, and she kept, against every scar, every lesson, every wall she'd built. She kept doing it. At the 43-minute mark of Caroline's second round of agonized waiting, the restaurant door opened. Na-ri walked in. She wasn't polished this time. Her hair was wind-tangled, her blouse wrinkled, her face tight with something Caroline hadn't seen on her before. Genuine fear. I heard, Na-ri said. Byung-soo called me. What do you need? I need my daughter back. Seung-ho will find her, and he doesn't fail at things he cares about. Na-rai pulled a chair around the counter and sat next to Caroline, not across from her, next to her. Close enough that their shoulders almost touched. What I mean is, what do you need? Right now. In this moment. Caroline looked at this woman, this impossibly composed magazine cover woman, and saw something she hadn't expected. Kindness. Real kindness. Not the performative kind. The kind that sits next to you and doesn't try to fix anything. I need someone to tell me she's okay, Caroline whispered. She's okay, Nari said. I don't have proof yet, but I know it in my gut. Children like Morgan, bright, brave, stubborn children, they survive. They always survive. Caroline's eyes burned. You don't even know her. I know her mother. That's enough. They sat together in silence, the two women from different worlds, different lives, different everything, held together by the thin, unbreakable thread of fear for a child they both wanted safe. The phone rang again at the 1 hour and 12-minute mark. We have her. 3 words. 3 words, and Caroline's knees gave out. She grabbed the counter, caught herself, pressed the phone to her ear so hard it hurt. Is she hurt? She's fine. Scared, but fine. She's with Byung-soo right now. He's bringing her home. Caroline let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Who took her? Was it Doomy? A pause, just long enough to be heavy. No, Seung-ho said. It wasn't your ex-husband. Then who? Another pause, longer this time. We'll talk when I get back. Byung-soo's car pulled up 12 minutes later. The back door opened, and Morgan tumbled out. Braids messy, uniform dusty, eyes red and puffy, and ran straight into Caroline's arms. Mama! Caroline held her so tight, she was afraid she might break her. She didn't care. She pressed her face into Morgan's hair and rocked her back and forth on the sidewalk like she was a baby again. I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe. Mama, there was a man. He said he was taking me to you, but he went the wrong way, and I got scared and... Shh. You're safe now. You're safe. Morgan pulled back and looked at her mother with those wide, serious eyes. The tall man found me. He came and got me out of the car. He told the bad man something in Korean, and the bad man got really scared and let me go. Caroline looked up at Byung-soo, who was standing by the car. What happened? She mouthed. Byung-soo's expression was carefully neutral. Boss handled it. The man who took her, he's being held for questioning. Questioning by who? By us. Caroline carried Morgan inside, fed her warm rice and stew, wrapped her in a blanket on the cot in the back room, and stayed with her until she fell asleep. It took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Morgan gripping General Whiskers with one hand and Caroline's finger with the other. When Caroline finally emerged, the restaurant was dark except for a single lamp at the corner table. Seung-ho sat there alone. He looked different. Not physically damaged, not disheveled. But there was something stripped bare about him, like the mask he wore, the control, the command, the careful distance, had been ripped away, and he hadn't had time to put it back on. Caroline sat across from him. Ma, tell me, she said. The man who took Morgan is named Pyo Sung-chul. He's a low-level operative for the Daesong clan, part of the advance team that arrived yesterday. Caroline's stomach turned to stone. They took my daughter to get to you. Yes. How did they even know about her? About me? Seung-ho's hands were on the table. He looked at them, then at her. Because someone told them. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough, damaged in a way she'd never heard before. It was Nari. The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air like sounds without meaning. Nari, Caroline repeated. The flash drive was real. The information was legitimate. But it was also a trap. A way to get close to us. To learn our routines. To find our vulnerabilities. Seong-ho's jaw was tight. Suk Junho found a secondary signal embedded in the drive. The moment we plugged it in, it began transmitting our location data. She led them straight to us, and straight to Morgan. But she sat with me today. She sat next to me and told me Morgan would be okay. I know. She held my hand, Seong-ho. I know. Caroline pressed her palms flat on the table. The wood grain blurred beneath her fingers. Is she working for your brother? She never stopped. His voice was barely above a whisper. The broken engagement. It was staged. She came here as Seung-jae's eyes and ears. Everything she said, everything she did. It was designed to make us lower our guard. Caroline thought about Nari's smile. The way she'd said, I know her mother. That's enough. The kindness that had felt so real, so warm, so fake. All of it, constructed and delivered with the precision of a weapon. Where is she now? Caroline asked. Gone. By the time we realized, she'd already left the guest house. Byung-soo found the room cleared out. No trace. Something dark and hot rose in Caroline's chest, an anger so deep it frightened her. She used my daughter as a chess piece. Yes, and she used me, my fear, my loneliness. She sat next to me and pretended to care because she knew I was desperate enough to believe it. Caroline. No. Caroline stood. The chair scraped back. No. You don't get to comfort me right now. Because this happened because of you. Your world. Your enemies. Your brother. My daughter was taken off a school sidewalk because I opened my door for you. Every word was a blade, and she meant every single one. Seong-ho didn't defend himself, didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just sat there and took it. Every word. Like he believed he deserved every single one, too. You're right, he said finally. And if you want me to leave, I'll leave tonight. All of us. You'll never see us again. Caroline stood there, shaking with rage and fear, and something else. Something that felt like grief for a thing that hadn't even fully formed before it was being torn apart. She thought about Morgan clutching General Whiskers. She thought about the $600 on the counter that first morning. She thought about Seong-ho wiping down her tables without being asked. She thought about the way he'd said, I will find your daughter. And he had. He had. Don't leave, she said. The words came out broken. Rough. Don't you dare leave. Seong-ho looked up at her. But if you stay, Caroline continued. Now you finish this. Your brother, the Daesong clan, Nari, all of it. You finish it. And you keep my daughter safe while you do. That's the deal. That's the deal, he repeated. Swear it. I swear it. On my father's name. On everything I am. Caroline nodded once. Hard. Then she turned and walked to the back room where Morgan was sleeping. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Seong-ho lower his head into his hands, and for the first time since the night his father died, let himself fall apart. 3 days of silence followed. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that fills a space after an explosion, when the dust is still settling and no one knows what's left standing. Caroline ran the restaurant. Seong-ho ran his operation. They existed in the same building but orbited different suns. She didn't bring him coffee, so he didn't help wipe down the tables. The small, fragile rituals they'd built, gone, blown apart by a betrayal neither of them had seen coming. Morgan, however, didn't get the memo. Mama, why isn't the tall man eating dinner with us anymore? He's busy, baby. He doesn't look busy. He looks sad. Eat your vegetables. He looks the way you looked after Daddy left. Caroline's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She stared at her daughter, this tiny, terrifying person who saw everything and understood more than any 6-year-old should. "That's different," Caroline said weakly. "Is it?" Caroline had no answer. On the 4th day, Seong-ho called a meeting. Not in the back room, in the restaurant itself after closing. All 20 of his men assembled, filling every chair, lining every wall. But Caroline hadn't seen them all together since that first night. The sight hit her like a wave of memory. The knocking, the door, the exhausted men filing in. But they were different now. Rested. Fed. Organized. And beneath the calm, furious. Every single one of them had heard about Morgan, and every single one of them had taken it personally. Shi-sung, the young one, was sitting in the corner with his fists clenched so tight, his knuckles had gone pale. Sung-ho stood at the front of the room. Behind him, Jun-ho had projected a map onto the wall using a small portable device. "Here's what we know," Sung-ho began. "Sung-jae has allied with the Daesung clan. Together, they've dismantled our network back home. 11 of our own people turned against us. Our assets have been seized. Our reputation damaged." He paused and let the weight of it settle. "But they made a mistake. They think we're broken. They think we're hiding in a foreign country with no resources, no allies, no plan." His gaze swept the room. "They're wrong." He pointed to the map. Red dots marked locations across Mokpo and surrounding cities. Junho has spent the last 62 hours using Na-ri's own data against her. The flash drive she gave us, despite the tracking signal, contained real intelligence, communications, financial records, meeting schedules. She gave us real information to make the trap believable. That was her mistake. Junho stood. "I've identified every bank account the Daesung clan uses to fund their operations. 12 accounts across 6 institutions. I've also found the communication server Seong-jae uses to coordinate with his moles. Amand." He allowed himself a small, grim smile. "I've identified the 3 remaining advance team members in this town." Murmurs rippled through the room. "Here's the plan." Seong-ho's voice cut through the noise. "We strike on 3 fronts simultaneously. First, Junho drains the Daesung clan's operational accounts. Not into our pockets, into charity organizations. Hospitals, schools, shelters. Every dollar they've stolen goes somewhere it can actually do good." Caroline, standing by the kitchen doorway, blinked. She hadn't expected that. "Second, we expose Sung-jae. The files contain proof of his conspiracy, enough to trigger an investigation by the authorities back home. We leak it to 3 major news outlets simultaneously. By morning, his face will be on every screen." "And third?" Byung-soo asked. Sung-ho looked at him. "Third, we go home." Silence. "The advance team here will be reported to local law enforcement with documented evidence of the abduction attempt. Na-ri's location will be included in the information sent to authorities. And we, all of us, will return to Mokpo and take back what's ours. Legally. Publicly. With the evidence to back every single claim." Woo Jin spoke up. "And the Daesung clan? Once their money is gone and their ally is exposed, they'll have bigger problems than us. Organizations like theirs survive on secrecy. We're about to take that away." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Byung-soo stood. "When do we move?" 48 hours. Seong-ho looked around the room. "Get ready." The men dispersed with quiet intensity. Not the chaotic scramble of desperate people, but the focused movement of a team with a purpose. Phones out. Laptops open. Plans in motion. Caroline hadn't moved from the kitchen doorway. Seong-ho approached her, stopped a few feet away, maintaining the distance that had grown between them like a wall of glass. "You heard everything," he said. "I did." "And?" Caroline studied him. This man who had knocked on her door with nothing. No resources. No plan. No hope. This man who had paid her rent and fixed her pipes and listened to her daughter's stories about butterflies. This man who had found Morgan when she was taken and held himself responsible when he didn't have to. This man who was about to go home and face his brother. "The charity thing," she said. "Redirecting the money to hospitals and schools. That was your idea? Does that surprise you?" "A little. You're a mafia boss. I'm a man who inherited a broken system. That doesn't mean I have to keep it broken." Caroline felt the glass wall between them crack. "You're going to do something stupid and dangerous, aren't you?" she said. "Almost certainly. And I can't stop you." "No." She took a breath. "Then I'm going with you." The words landed like a grenade. Seung-ho stared at her. "Absolutely not. You don't get to make that decision. You have a daughter, a restaurant, a life here. I'm not dragging you into. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing. My daughter was taken because of your brother. Nari used me, looked me in the eyes, and pretended to care about my child. And she's still out there. And you." Caroline stepped closer. The glass wall shattered. "You are not doing this alone." "Caroline, I know what alone looks like, Seung-ho. I lived it for 2 years. I will not let you go back to that life by yourself." The space between them was electric, charged, full of everything neither of them had said out loud. The late-night conversations, the quiet dinners, the way his eyes followed her across the room, the way her pulse jumped whenever he said her name. Seung-ho looked at her like she was the most impossible thing he'd ever encountered. "You are the most stubborn person I have ever met," he said. "Good. Then you know I'm not going to change my mind." He was quiet for a long time. "Morgan comes too," he finally said. "Where you go, she goes. And she will be protected by every man in this room. That is non-negotiable." "Agreed. And when this is over, whatever happens between us, you are free to walk away. No obligations, no debts. You owe me nothing. I know that." "Do you?" "Seung-ho." Caroline held his gaze. "I'm not here because I owe you. I'm here because somewhere between the stew and the eviction notice and the way you wave at my daughter with that ridiculous little hand gesture, I started caring about what happens to you, and that terrifies me. But I'm done being controlled by fear." He didn't respond with words. He extended his hand. Caroline took it. His grip was warm, steady, certain. They stood like that for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and in that silence, something settled between them. Not a declaration, not a promise, just an understanding. Deep and quiet and real. Then Morgan's voice drifted from the back room. "Mama, can General Whiskers come on the airplane too?" They both laughed, startled, helpless, a real laughter that broke the tension like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Yes, baby," Caroline called back. "General Whiskers can come." They flew out on a Tuesday, not on a cargo ship this time. Seung-ho had managed, through contacts Caroline didn't ask about, to arrange legitimate travel documents and commercial flights for all 21 men, plus Caroline and Morgan. The logistics alone should have been impossible. But Jun-ho, it turned out, could work miracles with a laptop and a strong internet connection. Morgan sat between Caroline and Shui-sung on the flight, vibrating with excitement. "Are there castles?" she asked Shui-sung. "There are palaces. Are there dragons?" "There are dragon statues." "Close enough." She pressed General Whiskers against the window. "Look, General, we're going on a mission." Caroline watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. She'd tried, really tried, to think of another way, to stay behind, to let Seong-ho handle it. But every time she considered it, she remembered Nari sitting next to her, holding her hand, pretending to care. And the rage came back, clean and clarifying. She wasn't going for Seong-ho. She was going for herself, for Morgan, for every person who'd ever been used as a pawn in someone else's game. They landed in a country Caroline had never seen, heard, or imagined herself visiting. The air was different, cool, tinged with salt from the nearby sea. The city spread out below the highway in clusters of concrete and glass, fishing boats dotting the harbor, mountains rising green in the distance. Byung-soo had arranged a safe house, a large, an unremarkable building in a residential area near the port. It had been owned by a retired member of the organization who'd remained loyal to Seong-ho. The old man, Mr. Yoon, 63, with a face like weathered leather and hands that still looked like they could bend steel, met them at the door. He took one look at Seong-ho and his eyes filled. He spoke in Korean, rapid, emotional, his voice cracking. Byung-soo translated quietly for Caroline. He's saying, he knew Seong-ho's father. He's saying the father would be proud. He's saying, welcome home. Seong-ho bowed deeply to the old man. When he straightened, his eyes were bright. Mr. Yoon then looked at Caroline, at Morgan, at General Whiskers. He said something to Seong-ho, who actually, for the first time Caroline had ever seen, blushed. What did he say? Caroline asked. Nothing important, Seong-ho said quickly. Byung-soo grinned. He said she's beautiful and asked if she's your wife. Seong-ho gave Byung-soo a look that could have peeled paint off a wall. Byung-soo's grin only widened. 48 hours. That's what Seong-ho had promised, and he delivered. On the first night, Junho executed the financial strike. 12 accounts, 6 banks. Over $4 million redirected in a cascade of anonymous transfers to children's hospitals, to educational foundations, to disaster relief organizations. By morning, the Daesung clan's war fund was empty. They'll know within hours, Junho reported, and they'll have no way to trace where the money went. On the second morning, the media strike landed. 3 news outlets, 2 national and 1 international, simultaneously published investigative pieces containing the evidence from Nari's flash drive. Seung-jae's face, his name, his communications with the Daesung clan, all of it laid bare. By noon, the story was trending. By evening, authorities had opened a formal investigation. And then came the part Caroline hadn't expected. Seong-ho held a press conference. She watched from the back of the room, Morgan on her hip, Byung-soo at her side, as Seong-ho stood behind a podium in a rented conference hall and addressed a room full of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. He didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a man telling the truth. My name is Kang Seong-ho, he began. For 3 generations, my family has operated in the space between business and crime, so I am not going to stand here and pretend otherwise. I inherited an organization with deep roots, some good, some rotten. My brother, Kang Seong-jae, attempted to destroy that organization and rebuild it for his own gain. He conspired with the Daesung clan. He betrayed our people, and he put innocent lives at risk, including the life of a 6-year-old child. A murmur swept the room. I am here today to announce 3 things. First, the evidence of my brother's conspiracy has been submitted to the authorities. I will cooperate fully with any investigation. Second, the Daesung clan's financial infrastructure has been dismantled. The funds have been redirected to charitable organizations. Third, he paused, looked at the cameras, looked, somehow, directly at Caroline, even though she was 30 feet away and half hidden behind a column. So third, I am dissolving my family's organization as it currently exists. The shipping company will continue, legally, transparently, under independent oversight. But the rest of it, the gray areas, the unwritten rules, the debts and loyalties that trapped people like my father and his father before him, that ends today. The room erupted with questions. Seung-ho answered them, calmly, methodically, without flinching. Byung-soo leaned toward Caroline. He's been wanting to do this since the day his father died. He just needed a reason brave enough to push him over the edge. Caroline looked at Seung-ho behind that podium, steady, certain, tearing down his own world so he could build something better. He's not doing this because of me, she said. No, Byung-soo agreed. He's doing it because of who he wants to be, but you're the one who showed him that person still existed. Seung-jae was arrested 3 days later, picked up at the border trying to flee the country. Na-ri was found 5 days after that, in a hotel room 2 cities away, with a packed suitcase and 3 different passports. Both were charged. Both would face trial. The Doisong clan fractured. Without funding, and with their alliance exposed, the internal power struggles tore them apart faster than any external enemy could have. And Seung-ho, true to his word, dismantled the empire his grandfather had built. It took weeks, not days. Meetings with lawyers, with regulators, with the men who'd served his family for decades. Some of them understood. Some were angry. Most were relieved. Shisong was the first to be officially released from service. Seung-ho called him into a room. She handed him an envelope containing enough money to attend university and told him he was free. Shisong cried. Again. You do that a lot, Morgan told him, patting his arm. It's okay. Mama says tears are just feelings that got too big for your body. 3 months after, Caroline stood in front of Mama T's kitchen, newly repainted, newly renovated, with a sign above the door that now read, Mama T's Kitchen, African and Korean cuisine. The renovation hadn't been Seung-ho's money. It had been hers, earned from 3 months of catering contracts that Byung-soo had helped her secure, cooking for events and parties and corporate lunches across town. Business was booming. She'd hired 2 assistants. She was looking at a second location. For the first time in years, Caroline was not surviving. She was building, and Seung-ho stood next to her on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking at the sign. African and Korean, he said. Fusion cuisine. Morgan's idea. She's a genius. She takes after me. He laughed. That rare, real laugh she'd only heard a handful of times. Each one a gift she filed away in a place she didn't examine too closely. So, Caroline said, what now? Seung-ho had been in and out of the country for weeks, handling the dissolution, the legal proceedings, the restructuring. But he kept coming back. Every time he showed up at the restaurant, sat at the corner table, and waited for Caroline to bring him a bowl of stew. He never asked if he could come. She never asked him to stay. It just happened. Like gravity. I've been offered a position, he said. Advisory role. Helping the government track and dismantle other organizations operating in the gray zones. Legal. Above board. Is that what you want? It's what I'm good at. That's not what I asked. He looked at her. That steady, deep gaze, but different now. Lighter. Like the well had been filled with something other than exhaustion. What I want, he said slowly, is complicated. Try me. I want to do work that matters. I want to build something honest. I want Shui-sung to finish university and stop crying at every meal. He paused. And I want to be wherever you are. The words sat between them. Not heavy, not dramatic. Simple. True. Like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples spreading outward in perfect circles. You know this is insane, Caroline said. You're a former mafia boss from a port city. I'm a broke single mother who runs a restaurant. We met because you knocked on my door in the middle of the night with 20 injured men. This is not how normal relationships start. I'm aware. My daughter has already named your potential dog. She told me yesterday. His name is Lieutenant Biscuit. That's where we are. I'm fine with Lieutenant Biscuit. Sung-ho. Caroline. They faced each other on the sidewalk. The sun was setting behind the restaurant, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Inside, Morgan was sitting on the counter, teaching Shi-sung how to fold napkins into swans while Byung-soo refereed. If we do this, Caroline said, we do it right. No more secrets. No more gray areas. No more back rooms with 3 laptops and coded messages. Agreed. And you eat dinner with us every night. At the table. Oh, not the corner. At the table. Like family. Something in Sung-ho's expression shifted. A tremor. A crack. An opening. Not of weakness. Of something finally being allowed to breathe after being locked away for a very long time. Like family, he repeated. Yes. I'd like that. Good. Caroline straightened her apron. Now come inside. The stew is ready, and Morgan's been asking about you all day. She made you a drawing of Lieutenant Biscuit. He has 6 legs in the picture, but we're going to be supportive about it. Sung-ho smiled, a real, full, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face, and followed her inside. The door closed behind them. Through the window, if you looked carefully, now you could see a little girl with braids launch herself off the counter into the arms of a tall man who caught her like he'd been waiting to catch her his whole life. You could see a stocky man with a scarred eyebrow laughing. A young man wiping his eyes again. And a woman, standing in the middle of all of it, hands on her hips, shaking her head, smiling the kind of smile that rewrites everything. In a small restaurant, in a small town, at the intersection of 2 worlds that were never supposed to meet, something extraordinary had taken root. Not because it was planned, not because it was perfect, but because one night, a woman heard a knock and chose to open the door. 1 year later, the invitation arrived on a Saturday. It was printed on thick cream paper, with both Korean and English text. And it read, "You are warmly invited to the grand opening of Mama T's, Mokpo, the 2nd location of Caroline Kang's award-winning African-Korean fusion restaurant." Caroline Kang. She'd kept her maiden name for the restaurant, but everywhere else, on the documents, on the official records, on the ring that sat on her left hand, she was Caroline Kang. The wedding had been small, 21 men in matching suits, the same 21 who'd stood on her doorstep that night, lined up as groomsmen. Morgan had been the flower girl, with general whiskers tucked under one arm and a basket of petals in the other. Mr. Yoon had wept openly. Shi-sung had, predictably, also wept. Byung-soo had pretended not to weep and fooled absolutely no one. And Seung-ho, the former head of a 3-generation syndicate, and the man who'd shown up on a bankrupt woman's doorstep with 20 men and no hope, had stood at the altar and said his vows in a voice that didn't waver once, because Kang Sung-ho did not fail at things he cared about. Now, standing in the new restaurant on opening night, Caroline looked out over a room packed with people, locals, food critics, old friends, new partners, 21 men who'd become family, and felt something she'd given up on ever feeling again. Whole. Morgan appeared at her side, now 8, taller, still carrying general whiskers everywhere, despite Caroline's gentle suggestions that maybe the rabbit could stay home sometimes. Mama. Yes, baby. Lieutenant Biscuit chewed Appa's shoe again. Appa, the Korean word for dad. Morgan had started using it 6 months ago, casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sung-ho had excused himself from the room when he first heard it. Byung-soo later told Caroline he'd found Boss in the back alley, looking up at the sky, breathing very carefully. "Tell Appa to hide his shoes better," Caroline said. "He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you the food critic from the national paper wants to talk to you." "Tell the food critic I'll be there in a minute." Morgan skipped away. Caroline watched her go. This brave, brilliant, impossible child who'd given a juice box to a stranger and accidentally started a chain of events that reshaped 2 lives, 2 families, 2 entire worlds. Seung-ho appeared beside her. No announcement, no fanfare. He was just there. The way he always was, steady, present. "Big night," he said. "Marsh, big night." "Nervous?" "Not even a little." He raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She looked at him. This man who'd knocked on her door with nothing and somehow given her everything. "I opened a door for 21 strangers at midnight. I survived a betrayal. I flew across the world with a 6-year-old and a stuffed rabbit to help take down a criminal organization. I married a former mafia boss." She smiled. "A restaurant opening? That's easy." He extended his hand. She took it. And together, they walked into the crowd, into the noise and the laughter and the clinking of glasses and the smell of food that bridged 2 continents. And they didn't look back. Not once. If this story made your heart race, and you're already wondering what happens next with Tumalo and Seung-ho, you're not alone. Well, hit that subscribe button right now, so you never miss another story that keeps you glued to your screen from the first word to the very last. Trust me, what's coming next is even bigger, even wilder, and you do not want to be the one who missed it.